There was a survey done recently from the conference board that said 25 to 35-year-olds, 48% don't have job satisfaction. 55 to 65-year-olds, this is in America, 52% don't have job satisfaction. That's sad. For me, that's sad.
Mm.
And shame on the older people for not figuring it out. I want to tell you, young adults, figure it out. Find that thing you love. Don't give up your dreams, and figure out how to get a career doing it.
Hello and welcome to Graduate Theory. My guest today is the Chairman of Rice-Cohen International, and he's one of the top executive recruiters in the world. He's recently co-authored a book with his daughter Courtney called Grad to Grown Up, where they share 68 tips to excel in your personal and professional life. Please welcome to the show today, Gene Rice.
James, thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to our conversation, my friend.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, it's great to have you on all the way from America as well. It's it's fantastic to be able to have these conversations with people like yourself. I'd love to start the conversation today talking about some of your experiences in executive recruitment and trying to find connected people to jobs and all that kind of process. What sort of questions do you ask that person to kind of try and work out where they might best be suited?
James, the one thing, my firm was an executive retained search firm. So the difference is that the clients would come to us and pay us a fee, and we'd work exclusively for them. And we got paid, whether we made the placement or not. We really became a consultant to the client. Now, thank God we made most of the placements. But when we would go out and we would interview people and try to see if it's a good fit, there's questions that I would always include in our interview. And I've placed over 1,000 C-level executives. My company has placed tens of thousands, right? Uh, but the questions that I would always ask someone up front, even before I shared information about what my client was looking for, I wanted to make sure it was a good fit. So I would ask them questions like this. I would say, listen, tell me in your own career, when have you been the happiest professionally? And what was going on that made you feel that way? Okay. Then I would follow up. The next question would be, in your current role, what do you enjoy most about your current role? If you were the CEO of your current company, what would you change about the company? What would you change about your role? That kind of would give us insight, James, into, is there any pain? Is there anything that they're unhappy about? And then I would always say to them, listen, if I gave you a magic wand and I said you can diagram the ideal next position for yourself, tell me what you would create. What would the company be doing? What would the culture be like? What would your role be like? And by asking those simple questions, and I encourage candidates to ask themselves those questions, it gave me a snapshot to see, does this candidate have are the things that made them happiest and the things that they enjoy most? Can my client offer that? And if they can, then I'm going to go, well, I called you about a specific client of ours that we're doing a retained search. Let me share with you how they could match up with the things you've shared with me, you know? And James, what I would always encourage people to look for in the 30 years I've been doing executive search, I can tell you there's three things that I've identified that will make for a good, not only a short-term fit between a candidate and a company, but more importantly, a good long-term fit. And I would always encourage people to look for these three things. The first thing I would tell them, even if it's an entry-level role to a senior role, you should feel by joining this firm that I can come in and I can add value. I can make a contribution, right? You should feel like I can join this firm and I can add something here. But equally as important, if you join a new firm, you should be, after a year down the road, be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, by me joining this company, I've grown professionally in these ways. There's got to be, you have to contribute, but you also have to grow. And if a young adult needs that growing piece, that professional growth is probably more important.
Mm.
The third and most important thing, and this is where a lot of people go astray, James, especially young adults. And the first two can be there, but if the third is not there, then I'm going to strongly recommend this is not the right place for you. You should not only respect the person you're reporting to and the people you're going to be working closely with, but you should like them enough personally that if you had to go out and break bread with them and do a business lunch or a business dinner, it wouldn't be something that you would dread doing. The personal relationships are critical. And for a young adult, that immediate supervisor is the most important, because if you go in there and you hate him or you hate her, in a very short period of time, you're going to be unhappy and you're going to be looking for a new position. So, those are the things that I would encourage your audience to look for. And those are the things that have helped me in my executive search career, as well as help people feel like it's a good match.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a great like checklist to go through there for people. And certainly, I like what you said about early days being important, the growth aspect of a role, right, and being able to say that you've learned, a certain amount through being at that company. I think that's just, especially when you're young, and there is a lot to learn. If you're not learning, then something is a little bit wrong. So yeah, certainly you should look out for that.
I'll add one other thing to your audience too, and this is something that we would do. This is something my firm created. It's funny. We've gone on. The biggest search firms in the world are Korn Ferry, Spencer Stewart, and Heidrick and Struggles. They've come to you. They use my firm in hiring some of their senior staff, and this is something that we've shared with them. But I would encourage your audience that if you're going to go on an interview, before you go on that interview, you should identify what is it about this company and this positions that's attracting you. What are the reasons why you're willing to take time to interview with this company? Sometimes you don't really know much, before the first interview, but you can do your research. You can look online. You can Google the company. You can look at their mission statement, what the firm's all about. And then after every interview, I would always encourage candidates to keep a sheet of paper. We would do this. My search professionals would do that, with our candidates. Tell me the reasons why you're interested in this position. What's attracting you? Okay. After every interview, we would say, did those reasons hold true? Did any new reasons surface? We might say to them, what questions or what concerns must you have addressed before you're in a position to make the best decision for you and your family around, is this the right company for you? Right? So we might even get to a certain point where we might suggest some reasons to them that they didn't mention because we know it's an advantage. Maybe they have a better pension plan. Maybe their vacation policy is longer. Maybe they have a new product coming out. But at the end of this interviewing process, if they're on 3, 4, or 5 interviews, there should be 12, 13, 14 reasons why they're interested. Now, money can be one of them, James. But if money is the only thing that's driving you to a new job, you shouldn't take that job. Because as soon as someone else comes along and offers you a little bit more money, you'll be leaving and you'll end up being a ping pong ball and it's going to affect your career. So I encourage them to identify what are the reasons why you're taking the time to interview. And then at the end, what are the reasons why you want to join this firm in this position?
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's really beneficial, like you said, to have that list of things, reasons why. Certainly, you mentioned one thing there about being a ping pong ball in terms of money and how that can be detrimental to your career, and that's something that we hear a lot about. I guess as changing roles can be good, from a money perspective, particularly early on. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how that can be seen as a negative thing when perhaps as you do that
Well,
often.
listen, it's, with the COVID, what's going on with COVID, some of the rules have changed, but only in my opinion in the short term, James. I can't tell you how many clients, when we would take on a retained search, under their qualifications would say to us, I don't care who the candidate is, I don't care how strong the candidate is, if they've had more than 2 jobs in a 5-year period, I do not want to interview them. I am not interested. Now, why is that? Because they feel the candidate doesn't have any loyalty. The candidate's going to leave as soon as someone comes along and offers them more money. So they want people, because in every position, no matter how great the company is, no matter how great the onboarding process is, there is a learning curve you have to go through, right? There is, there's an adjustment. And firms don't want people that the first time there's a challenge, they end up leaving. They want people that are going to hang in there, right? So that's why I say that,
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. And so, like, do you think that applies? Like, does that apply more so to like senior people, or does that like what would your advice be to someone that is perhaps in the first few years of their career? Should they still avoid doing things like that?
Listen, if they absolutely hate their job, if they hate their manager and they're not growing professionally, then they have to look and they have to leave. But what I encourage them to do, you do not want to just, your first job, my strong professional opinion, you got to hang in there for at least 2 years. All right. You got to learn. Otherwise, people think that you're not, that, that you're going to bounce every time there's any kind of difficulty. You have to get your feet, under you, and you have to stay there a period of time.
Mm,
All right. And I think when you make decisions, you should be thinking, is this a place that I can spend the next 5 years of my career? Because as you move up and as you progress, companies are looking for that. They're not looking for someone that every 2 years goes on and takes a different role.
mm, yeah.
And I think and I think Australia and New Zealand is very similar to the states in that. I told you
Mm,
that I was invited because of my firm and being recognized. I was invited to be the keynote speaker one year at the Australia New Zealand Executive Search Conference in Christchurch, New Zealand. Now I couldn't accept the invitation, and it's one of my greatest regrets because my kids were young. But
mm,
I think search is very similar,
yeah.
in Australia, New Zealand, as it is here in North America.
Mm, yeah. I guess like we were saying, trying not to leave jobs when it gets hard, or if you've joined a company that perhaps isn't the right fit, it's important that if you are going to move, like that checklist of things that you were saying earlier, have at least sort of 10 things, 10 reasons why this company is a good place, and really being sure about that is really important. Um,
Yeah. And James, here's the thing. And sometimes you can't help making a move, right? Sometimes a company, maybe, your company sold, right? Maybe things have changed. And if that happens and and a move had to take place that was out of your control, I encourage when they put their resume or their CV together that they list a reason why so people can see that.
mhm.
Instead of looking at, okay, you only spent a year here and you only spent 2 years here, if there's reasons behind it that back it up, I would put that right on the CV or the resume.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's interesting. What about? I want to ask you too about negotiating like a salary and perhaps like a pay rise and that kind of thing too, because I'm sure you've been involved in situations like that. Do you have any process or recommendations to someone that is going through that?
Yeah. Well, here's the things I want to first make your audience aware of, right? It's okay up front, especially if there's a search firm or a recruiter involved, James, to let them know what you're looking for, right? From a compensation perspective.
Mm,
But the thing that I've seen, especially with young adults, is they'll get the offer and they automatically accept the offer. I want you to know that if you've gone through an interviewing process and the company offers you a job, you trying to negotiate that offer is not going to jeopardize them making you the offer or taking away the written offer, right?
mm,
So I always recommend that they get the offer in writing, and then I want to tell your audience that's when the rules of the games change. Now they're in control. That firm wants them, right? So it's perfectly okay if you do it professionally to go back. And that's one of the chapters in the book, Grad to Grown Up. It talks about how to negotiate the offer once you get it. It's perfectly okay, James, to go back and say, hey, I'm really excited, but you have to do it the right way. So
Mm,
you send the email back and say, I am really excited about your company, and here's the reasons why. I know I can really contribute, and here's the reasons why. Thank you so much for your offer. But after reviewing it, I was hoping to get a higher base salary. And if there's reasons for that, you say, maybe I have to move, or maybe I'm going to be commuting further or whatever.
mm,
And if there is no reason, say maybe because I know some of the other companies I interviewed were talking to me about a higher base salary. But if you can raise the base salary by this amount, I'm prepared to resign and start on such and such a date,
mm,
right? So you have to know how to go back and ask. And how you go back and ask is you tell them, first of all, why you're attracted to their company, why the reasons why you believe you're going to do a great job for them. And then you ask for what you want, but you tell them, you offer them something. But if you're willing to do this, I'm ready to resign and start on this date. Now, here's what happens. A lot of times they'll come back and they'll meet you in the middle, right? A lot of times they might come back and say, I'm sorry, you're at the top of the range, but at least you tried. And then you can go back again.
mm,
If they won't increase your base salary, maybe you can ask for things. Well, if you can't increase the base salary, could you possibly, guarantee my bonus? Can you give me a review earlier than you normally would, which would then qualify me for an increase? Could you give me another week's vacation? Right? So you go back and you ask again for other things that might not be base salary related,
mm,
right? And and see what they say. And my experience has been probably 60 to 65% of the time they'll increase the base salary. If they won't increase the base salary, probably 20 to 25% on top of that, they'll guarantee a bonus or they'll do an early review so they can increase your base salary. And if nothing else, I would say they would give you an extra week vacation. But 95% of the time, my experience has been if you do it professionally, that you can
mm.
get more than what the company gave you in the offer letter. And I encourage people to do that. Okay. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think often it can be quite scary almost to like or nerve wracking definitely to go back and be like, I'd really like it a little bit more or whatever. Because yeah, you feel like if they say no, then like you could lose your job and all that kind of stuff. So it's nice to
James, I
hear
want
that.
your audience to know they will not retract the offer. That's what they're afraid of. They will not retract the
Yeah.
offer. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you something. They're going to respect you more for negotiating. They're going to respect you.
Mm,
Now, there's a way of doing it. You just don't go back and say, well, I was really hoping for a higher base salary. No, you have to do it professionally. You have to thank them for the offer. You want to tell them why you're so excited about their company. You want to tell them why you know you're going to do a great job. Here's the reasons why I know this is a great match. And when you ask for something, you got to give them something in return. If you give it to me, I will resign immediately and start for you on such and such a date. Okay? That's
mm.
how you go back professionally. That's how you address that.
Yeah, cool.
Okay?
Yeah, those are some really useful tips. I think
Yeah.
that's
And
good news.
and here's what I want to tell your audience, and this is what I've experienced with people your age, James, in my company. I think I told you that the book Grad to Grown Up was based on 25 plus years of me bringing in 4 college interns every summer, right, for 8 weeks, and these were very very bright. Uh, Large majority were U.S. Students going into their last year of college, right? They competed for this internship against other candidates, so they were bright and they were talented. And my experience is when I would bring them into my company, I felt they're investing 8 weeks in my firm. I felt important that I would spend some time with them. So once a week, I spend 2 hours with them, and it started off as Gene's life lessons, the things I wish I knew, James, going into my last year of university, right? And what came out of it was all of their questions, all of, can you talk about this? Can you talk about this? And I was initially amazed how ill prepared a large majority of them are to not only start their professional careers, but their personal careers.
Mm.
And what came out of it is, and I got to tell you, my interns went on to be lawyers, doctors, accountants, engineers, professional athletes. Okay. But a lot of them would come back to me years later and they pursued their job or their career based on someone of influence, their parent, a grandparent, a teacher, saying you should go into this field, you can make a good living. And how many of them went into it, James, and once they did it, hated what they were doing. So they went to school for all these years, and then when they finally did it, they hated it. I have two examples of two that went to two of the best law schools in America, NYU and Boston College. These two graduated in the top 25% of their class. They came out and worked for big law firms. And a year into it, they hated waking up in the morning and going to what they were doing. So there's two things that I want to encourage your audience. Number one, if there's something, I want them to pursue their passions. I think one of the greatest goals in life should be for every human being to find something that they sincerely love doing, James, and then to do it well enough that you can create a career doing it. Because if you can do that, and if you can find that thing you love, and you can make a living doing it, you wake up in the morning not going to work. You don't wake up in the morning going to a job. You wake up in the morning going to something you sincerely love. My personal experience is your health is better, your personal relationships are better. The glass isn't half full. It can be overflowing and you can have purpose in your life. So I encourage your audience to do that. Now, when they find that thing they think they're passionate about, or even if they want to be a lawyer or if they want to be an accountant, I encourage them not to to do internships, even if it's free internships. And I'll give you an example. My daughter, who I wrote the book with, she went to one of the best universities here called Lehigh University. She was a double major in English and economics. Graduated at the top of her class, where the point was her university, if she got a certain grade level, they would pay for her advanced degree. They paid for her advanced degree. She thought she wanted to be a lawyer. Based on my experience, I said, Courtney, let's see if we can find a small law firm. We'll tell them you're willing to work for free, that will take you in this summer and expose you to what it is being a lawyer. And she was able to find, James, a small law firm where a partner took her in. He exposed her to every part of being a lawyer, the research, the administrative part of it. He took her into the courtroom multiple times. At the end of that summer, she had no interest in being a lawyer anymore. She was doing that because she thought, coming out of this prestigious university, this is what she should be doing, something like this. Her passion had always been being in the classroom, teaching. But she thought that was under her education. Well, she became a high school English teacher. And when I tell you, she loves waking up and her students love her. And maybe she's not making as much money as she might have done as a lawyer, but she's a lot happier and she has purpose in her life. So I encourage your audience to, first of all, to follow their dreams. Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Do not give up your passions. Try to find purpose in your life. And I encourage them strongly to do an internship before they graduate from university and say, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Okay? That's my experience. And let me tell you something. There was a survey done recently from the conference board that said 25 to 35-year-olds, 48% don't have job satisfaction. 55 to 65-year-olds, this is in America, 52% don't have job satisfaction. That's sad. For me, that's sad.
Mm.
And, shame on the older people for not figuring it out. I want to tell you, young adults, figure it out. Find that thing you love. Don't give up your dreams. And figure out how to get a career doing it.
Mm.
Okay?
Yeah, what do you have you thought about how you would go if you were someone that was trying to find their passion? I think the piece there about interning for free somewhere that you think you might like and then sort of testing it out is a great approach. Is there anything else there that you would say if I was younger, how you would sort of think about trying to find your passion in something that really clicked with you?
Yeah. I'm going to give you a real life example because I mentor a lot of young adults, James, right? My wife and I started a charity that helps children between the ages of 10 and 18 who are coming from underserved environments, but they have a passion, but don't have the money to pursue the passion. We have a charity called the Plant a Seed Inspire Dream Foundation that steps in, James, and we will find the young person, the teacher, the mentor, the coach. So it could be guitar, singing lessons, every sport you could imagine, dance, gymnastics, whatever it might be, and then we'll put them together. Well, another charity had heard about our charity, and this charity in America is called Foster Kids. I don't know if you have that in Australia, James, but basically it's for kids that their parents either died or their parents gave them up, and they live in foster homes with other families. And this charity would help the foster child get into college. And then if they went to college and they couldn't get their first job, they would reach out to mentors who might be able to give them some guidance. So this charity called me because they knew me from this other charity and said, "We have this great young man graduating from Temple University. Would you speak to him? He's having a very, very hard time getting his first job." I said, "Sure." I scheduled a call with him. The first thing I asked him is, "What was your major? What did you major in?" And he says, "Sports management." Now, everyone in America wants to go into sports management, but there's no jobs. And the few jobs there are, James, you usually get them because you know somebody, a relative, a family friend. It's very, very difficult to break into the sports management industry in America. I don't know how it is in Australia, but it's very difficult here. So I said to him, "How passionate are you about this?" He goes, "I am extremely passionate." I said, "Okay, because, I said, what have you done so far?" He goes, "Well, I've sent my resume out." He was from Philadelphia, to the Philadelphia Eagles, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Philadelphia Union, and the Philadelphia Flyers. I said, "Well, what's happened?" He goes, "No one's gotten back to me." I'm like, "Okay, well, let me explain rule number one. If they were looking for someone that had absolutely no experience, they're going to reach out to you and the other 1,000 resumes they got, right? You're never going to get a job that way, right?"
Mm.
I said, "But I'm going to ask you two questions. How passionate are you? Because I will help you, but we're going to have to go on a journey together. And if we get lucky, you'll probably end up in Des Moines, Iowa, working for the lowest level baseball franchise there is. Are you willing to pick up from Philadelphia and move to Des Moines, Iowa?" He goes, "I'll move anywhere." I said, "Okay, fine." I said, "Now, the second thing, I need you to tell me plan B. If we go on this journey together when we strike out, which we might, I want to know what other kind of job you'll take. What other kind of role would you be interested in? Because I don't want to start this without having a backup plan." And he said, "I would take a sales role." I said, "Great. There's a lot of different sales jobs that we can do." So here's what we did. And here's what I want your audience to understand. In my executive search career, James, because I was on a number of these top executive recruiters in the world lists, I would get every single week between 80 and 120 resumes sent to me. I couldn't even read them. And I couldn't probably, out of those 100 resumes, if I could help one person, it probably was a lot because the way the executive retain industry works, you specialize in a vertical market. You become the top executive recruiter in this field. My field was management consulting and education technology, ed tech. So if we placed the managing partner of McKinsey, the managing partner of KPMG, the CEO of Mercer Consulting, right? If you came from that industry, I could probably help. You could be the CEO of the best medical device company in the world. I'm not the right person. I can't, my relationships are not there. However, James, twice a year on average, I would get an email from a young person like yourself. And the email will go something like this: I have a passion for the executive search or the human resource industry. I've done some research and I know you're a thought leader in the industry. Would you spend a few minutes with me and give me some guidance? Now, I would always respond to that type of email. I would always spend time with that young person. And I want you to know, senior executives, 99% of them would do the exact same thing. Why? For no other reason, you'd want someone to help your family member, right? I would always do that. So with this young man, the strategy that we followed, right, is I had him do research and identify every C-level executive within 100 miles of Philadelphia. I wanted them to start with the major franchises, the Sixers, the Eagles, the Union. Then go down to AAA, then AA and single A. And I said, once we strike out there, we'll expand in 300-mile radiuses. And if we get lucky, you'll end up in Des Moines, Iowa. He did the research. He identified the C-level executives' names and got their emails. I helped him write the email. He sent the email out, calls me back, and says, the chief marketing officer of the Philadelphia 76ers says I can spend some time with you on Friday. I said, great. I helped him prepare for that call with the chief marketing officer. I said, when that call is over, I want you to call me. An hour after the call, he calls me. I said, how did it go? He goes, I think it went well. He invited me to meet 4 people on Tuesday. And I'm like, wait a second. He's inviting you in to meet 4 people on Tuesday? That means there's a job. He's not going to waste your time and his staff's time if there wasn't a job. Well, the end result, I prepared him for how to conduct those interviews. He ended up getting hired in the corporate sales department of the Philadelphia 76ers. He's now working for one of the big hockey franchises out in the West Coast. So to answer your question, I would tell your audience, do not be intimidated reaching out to a senior person and asking for guidance and asking for help. Be prepared for that call. Come in. Come in with questions. Ask him, does he have anyone he knows that he thinks could be looking for someone? Share with them what you're looking for. Ask if you can stay in contact with him, right? If it goes really well and there's a position and he leads you in, you're going to be received very differently within that firm than whether you sent your resume in blind. So that's the first advice I would give. The second advice I would give you is, I told you this. I believe one of the other goals in life is every person, in chess it's called a grandmaster. In science it's called a Nobel Prize winner. I think one of the goals of every human being should be to become a grandmaster of interviewing. Learn how to interview like a grandmaster. And why is that so important? Because when you're interviewing for the job you really want, you're going to be interviewing against 4 or 5 other people. The grandmaster interviewer gets the job, number one. And number two, he gets paid better. So learn. And in the book, Grad to Grown Up, we take them through how to become a grandmaster interviewer. And it's a goal that I want every young adult to have. Because, here in the States, what happens, James, is all the kids are coming out of the universities and they go to the career center for advice. And the career centers don't really have hands-on experience. They're all preparing the students the same way how to interview. So when they're interviewing exactly the same way as every other kid coming out of university. So you want to separate yourself. You want to become that grandmaster.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. No, that was really good story there. Thanks for sharing. And it's interesting to hear that process and what you're able to achieve, because I think it really shows that, yeah, like you said, if reaching out is something that we can all do and something that can have really it can be life changing if things go the right way. So yeah, really interesting to hear that story there. Um, like the grandmaster of interviewing side of things, what are some things like what are the key things that could really set you up? Is it like to do with like preparing in a certain way, or is it conducting yourself during the interview that's really important, or what is? I'm interested to hear what some of the key things to
Let me
focus
take
on
you
would be.
through it, but I'll take you through it. But I'm not going to probably do it justice because there's 5 different chapters in the book on each step, each stage. But let me just take you through it, James. First of all, you got to do upfront research. Okay, you have to do your research before the interview. But there's 5 key points to becoming a grandmaster. Okay, and I'll take you through the 5 key points. And the first thing is I'm going to ask you a question, James. Let's fast forward 10 years down the road. You're an executive with a company and you have a key position that you have to hire. You interview 5 candidates. At the end of the interviewing process, there's 2 candidates that everyone who interviewed, you included, say both of these candidates are exceptional. Both of them can do a phenomenal job. They have equal experience. They both want the job, and but all you have is one job to offer. But you have 2 great candidates. What do you think if you were making that decision as the manager? What might make you pick one over the other?
I'd say maybe like which one do I get along best with would maybe
Bingo.
be one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All ties will go to the candidate that made the best personal connection with you. Okay? And that's the first thing, the first step of becoming a grandmaster is being able to establish chemistry and rapport with the person you're meeting with. Now, how do you do that? Hopefully, beforehand, you're looking at their LinkedIn profile, you're Googling them, you're getting as much background information as you can. You try to find out where they went to school, right? So when you go in, you have something to talk about. I would always coach the candidates. You don't want to go right into the interview. Try to have a connection, right? And if you can't do any research before, when you go in, steal with your eyes. Look around the room. If there's a picture with them with their child playing soccer, if there's a picture with them fishing, your role and your job is to establish rapport with them, right? Nothing else. Talk about the weather. Talk about how long they've been with the company, but establish chemistry. Because when the whole interview is over and you're following up with an email to thank them within 24 hours, I'm going to ask you to put that personal connection in the email when you follow up, right? So that's the first thing, to establish chemistry and rapport. The second step of the 5 step becoming a grandmaster, let me ask you a question. When you went to school, how much better would you do on a test if you had the answers to the test before you took the test?
A lot better.
You do a lot better. That's the second thing. What a lot of people assume, James, right, is they got a job description they saw online, or maybe they're dealing with a recruiter who told them this is what they're looking for, right? And they assume that's what they're looking for. I want your audience to understand that when they're putting together that job description, there's different people that are putting different parts of it in place, right? You know, and then HR or talent acquisition is putting that job description together. They need to understand that everyone they're meeting with in an interview will have a little bit different twist or criteria. The direct boss is going to be looking for something very specific from the HR person. The HR person is going to be looking for something very different from the peer. The senior executive who's interviewing the candidate, they're going to be looking for something different than the direct boss or the HR person. So I encourage people early on, after you establish rapport, to ask a very simple question. And the question goes something like this: I was very interested in coming in and meeting with you today. Uh, and, I know we have a limited amount of time together. Would you mind sharing with me, and I've read your job description, but would you mind sharing with me what's most important to you in the background of the candidate that you want to bring in to do this role? And shut up. And the first 2 or 3 things that they say to you, in that person's mind, James, that is the most important things to that person. And your responsibility before that interview is over is to share with that person how you match to their criteria. So that's the second step in becoming a grandmaster. And you have to work on the words. Each person asks that question a little differently. But the second step is, if you can get the answers to the test before you take the test, try to get the answers to the test. Right?
Mm.
Now, the third step. In every interview, you're going to be asked a series of questions. Okay? They could be behavior-based questions. And that's a real common way, behavior based. I don't know if you've had any experience with that, but in the book Grad, the Grown Up, it explains exactly what behavior based interviewing is, the kind of questions to expect. But you're going to be asked a series of questions. You have to understand how to answer them professionally, right? And we teach them how to do that. But then equally, there's going to come a time where they're going to say, "Do you have any questions for me?" And this is where a lot of young adults go astray. And I'll give you an example. I had someone ask me if I would help this young man recently who was an engineering graduate from one of the top universities here, Penn State University. He had a great GPA. He looked like he walked out of GQ magazine, a very professional appearance. And he had 9 interviews and got no offers. And if you're coming out of the school he's coming out of with an engineering degree and his GPA, he should have had 4 or 5 of those 9 offers. So when I was asking him, take me through the interviews, right? He was asking what I call win-lose questions. Okay? Win-lose questions. And I want your audience to know, I want every question that someone has, I want every question answered before they accept or deny a job. But there's a time and place to ask them. So he asked one company, "Do you have any questions for me?" He goes, "Yeah, I noticed your stock price has been declining. Can you tell me why?" Listen, that's a question you may want to ask, but wait until you have the offer,
Mm.
right? He asked another company, "I did some background, and I know that your CEO has some sexual harassment charges against him. Can you tell me why? How is that going?" Right? People are automatically thinking he's feeling negative about the company. So I go over win-win questions. And your audience, I want them to know, they can go to the website Grad2 Grownup, GRADTO grownup.com, and they can download for free win-win questions that they should ask in an interview, right? What are they? And these are very basic kinds of questions, but they really make a difference. Okay,
Mm.
so that's the third skill in becoming a grandmaster. Answering their questions appropriately, and then asking the right questions. And then the fourth part of it is, a lot of people will leave an interview and they think it went great, right? But they leave the interview and they don't even realize that the person they interviewed with might have had 1 or 2 concerns. I want your audience to understand, James, that everyone who does any type of interviewing will always have some sort of concerns about the candidate they're interviewing. Sometimes the candidate is overqualified, sometimes the candidate's underqualified. As an executive search professional, the only time I got concerned is when there was no concerns, because they're the buying signals. So accept the fact that they're going to have concerns. What's not acceptable is you not having an opportunity to have that concern verbalized to yourself. And if it's false, overcoming it and getting agreement, it's no longer a concern. But if it's real, to minimize it and maximize your strengths. So let me give you an example. Towards the end of the interview, you want to say something like this: "I was really excited about coming in and meeting with you. And after spending time with you, I want you to know that my interest has gone up," if that's true. "And here's why it's gone up. Also, based on what you've shared with me around what you're looking for in the candidate's background, I believe I'm a really strong fit, and here's why. Do you have any concerns that I could add value to the ABC company in this role?" And shut up. And if they come back and the concern is false, you simply say, "I can understand why you might feel that way, but let me share with you why I don't believe that's a concern." And then address it and end by saying, does that make you feel better about that concern? Okay. If the concern is real, someone said to me, I'm completely bald. I need someone with a full head of hair. Listen, I cannot grow any more hair, but what I do have is I have a work ethic that's second to none. I will be the first one in the office in the morning, the last one to leave. You'll find nobody that will do research on his own. You'll find nobody that will be more loyal to the firm, and you'll find no one that the staff will enjoy working with more than myself. If given the opportunity for this role, I promise you, you'll never regret that decision. You can't change the real concern, but you can go back and talk about your strengths. Okay?
Mm.
That's the fourth skill in becoming a grandmaster. And the fifth and final skill, I don't want anyone to spend time on an interview without understanding what the next step is. So we take them through on how to do that professionally. And I also want your audience to know this. I believe anyone, if you're taking the time to interview, you have one goal and one goal only, James, to get the offer. Whether you accept the offer or not, that's your decision. But don't go into an interview without saying, this is my goal. I'm going to do everything in my ability to get the offer on this. It's perfectly okay to turn something down, but I want you to be in the driver's seat, not the company.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a way of following up professionally. There's a way of doing that. And, that's all in the book as well.
No, that's really
Hopefully that
cool.
addressed your question.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for people listening, certainly getting a copy of the book would be a really good move because I think there are, you can explore these kinds of topics in a lot more detail. But I have a question for you, Gene. And so you've spoken about the book a lot, and lots of people have read it now. But I wonder if are there any parts of the book that you think are underappreciated or people don't speak about enough, or you wish people were more interested in? Is there any parts of the book that fits that for you?
Yeah. Let me just share with you. The book is 68 tips on how to create a professional and personal life that you can be proud of, right? It goes from everything. So when the agent was shopping the book, James, all the publishers wanted me to do the entire book on career and job search. That's not the book I wanted to write. And the reason why that's not the book I wanted to write is my 30 years in executive search has taught me one thing. There's no real professional success without personal success. So what the book goes into, James, is it goes into the first section is life, right? Life, tips on life. There's things about understanding and a foundation, right? It's understanding what a linchpin is and the things you need to do every week to stay healthy, mentally and physically, right? It goes into the importance of gratitude and how to establish that. Then it goes into job search. Then it goes into career. You're getting a job, but how you need to show up, right? There's no elevator to success, James. You got to take the stairs. And we talk about that, right? What does that mean, taking the stairs, right? The fourth section, right, is personal finance. How did I go about creating great wealth, and simple things that they can follow, right?
Mm.
On understanding the stock market, how I invested, what I did, the mistakes I made, the things I did right. And the last section was the hardest section. It was health and relationships, and I'll share a couple of things with you because it might give you some insight into the book. I got an email 2 weeks ago. The book's been out for 1 month. I got an email 2 weeks ago from a young lawyer in New York City, and he had just read my book. And he said, I just finished putting in this 14-hour day, and I wanted to get a bite to eat. So I went into a restaurant by myself, and I was eating by myself. And I looked at the bar, and there was an older man at the bar drinking by himself. And I just read your book, and one of the chapters in the book, James, is talk to the oldest person in the room. And the chapter talks about how much knowledge and information a young person can get from a senior person, and the questions that you need to ask to open up that conversation. So he said, I just read your book, so I figured, what the heck? I finished dinner. I'm going to go up and have a beer next to this guy and ask him some of your questions. He said 2.5 hours later, right? I had one of the best nights of my life. The gentleman was he was a senior writer on the Johnny Carson show. And without reading that chapter in your book, I never would have taken it upon myself to sit next to him and ask him some of those questions. Another young man out of Seattle, Washington, read the book and he sends me an email. And in the last section, it talks about marriage and how important it is marrying the right person and how your happiness or unhappiness can come from that decision. And he was living with a young lady, and she was putting a lot of pressure on him to go take to the next step. And he read the book and read that chapter and said, it gave me what I needed to realize this wasn't the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, you know? And that's why I wrote the book. If someone can get out of those 68 tips, one thing like that, I don't care if anything else happens. That to me is why I wrote it. And Courtney, my daughter, what she did is she loves teaching. She was in a public school for 8 years. It was a toxic work environment. She loved the classroom, but everyone was resigning from the department. The boss was a nightmare, right? And after writing the book, it gave her what she needed to go out and interview and get a new job in this great private school that embraces her. She is so happy, So those are the things that is some of the stuff that we didn't talk about that's in the book that can help people.
Mm, yeah, no, I think that's really cool, and it's great to hear that it covers everything from careers, but also everything else that you sort of want to know as a young person as well. And really generous
Yeah.
of you to put it all in one place for people. I think. Gene, we're coming up to the end of the interview now, and a question that I ask all the guests that I have on the show is if you could uh, rewind the clock, if you could go back to the days where you just finished university and you were going out into the world, knowing what you know now and knowing that, all the advice that you've written, what are some things that you would do differently, or what is some advice that you would give yourself if you were back in your shoes, in that situation?
It's funny, James, right? I think I don't know if I shared this with you, but my career was very different. I started off owning rock and roll clubs in New York, right? I owned two rock and roll clubs that only booked original music and had bands like the Ramones and the Stray Cats and Joan Jett and Bo Diddley and Richie Havens. I left that business because the first one was extremely successful. The second one was a failure. And my wife would only marry me if I got out of that business. But then I went into corporate America. And in corporate America, I was with a division of a Fortune 100 firm, an international Fortune 100 firm, Alcatel, a French company. And in 7 years, I was promoted 5 times. I went from a sales rep to a sales manager to a general manager to a district manager. My last job was heading up all East Coast operations with over 1,000 people reporting to me. I left that job and I was making a heck of a lot of money for one reason and one reason only. I was never home at night. I was traveling a great deal and we had a young family and I was looking to have some work-life balance. I went into executive search, James, because I had used search firms myself. I knew I could bring some value to it, but I never knew what I would find. I did it because I could be home at night. Now, it went on to be extremely successful very fast. But what I'm going to tell your audience, what I would do differently, I found purpose in executive search. So even though when my firm became one of the largest retained search firms in the world, I never stopped leading the searches because I got purpose talking to the executives, talking to the clients, and putting a good match together. Half of the people that I would place in these C-level jobs had to pick up their families from one city and move them to another city for the role. And I felt that if I'm going to pick this person's family up and move them, I have to make sure that this is a good match. And I found purpose in that. I had passion. I was excited. I woke up in the morning and I couldn't wait to go to work and do what I did. Uh, so if I had to go back, I think I would have tried to identify early on where that passion was and that purpose, and might have been a little bit more strategic in looking for it. I got very, very lucky and fortunate. So many other people do not. Now, it went on. The other thing is, this book that I wrote, every financial reward that comes to me is going to be donated directly to the charity my wife and I started, the Plant a Seed, Inspire a Dream Foundation, to help more kids pursue their passions. So I'm a big believer. Pursue your passions. Find purpose in your life. If you can find that and you can make a career figuring out how to pursue those things, you're going to be healthier, you're going to be happier, you're going to smile more. And that's the message I want to leave your audience with.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thanks so much for sharing that with us, Gene. Thanks so much for sharing your personal journey as well. It's really interesting to hear how you've gotten to where you are. Where can people go following this episode to find out more about yourself, find out more about the book? Where's the place to
Yeah,
go?
first of all, go to LinkedIn, Gene Rice, Gene Rice, Rice, Rice-Cohen International. You can leave me a message. I'll respond. We have a website for the book, Grad to Grown Up, GRADTO grownup.com. You can download some free chapters. You can send me an email on the website. The book can be purchased anywhere. Amazon. It's got tons of reviews. So far, the feedback has been really positive. I feel really good about that. Walmart, Target, anywhere.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you want to get my takeaways, the things that I learnt from this episode, please go to graduatetheory.com/subscribe, where you can get my takeaways and all the information about each episode straight to your inbox. Thanks so much for listening again today, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week.